The substance that has most effect upon our culture and upon our lives is completely invisible. We can only see its effects. This substance is information. Science started out as an offshoot of magic. The two became completely divorced from each other and bitter enemies, although I tend to think that at the present moment the two are growing back together again. I was reading recently that people at the cutting edge of quantum physics believe that information is a super weird substance, to quote the actual phraseology, which underlies everything in the universe, which is more fundamental than gravity or electromagnetism or the two nuclear forces. This would tend to suggest that our entire physical universe is the secondary byproduct of a primal information, or, to put it in more magically acceptable terms, in the beginning there was the Word. As I understand the theory of period information doubling, this states that if we take one period of human information as being the time between the invention of the first hand axe, say around 50,000 BC, and 1 AD, then this is one period of human information, and we can measure it by how many human inventions we came up with during that time. Then we see how long it takes for us to have twice as many inventions. This means that human information has doubled. As it turns out, after the first 50,000 year period, the second period is about 1500 years, say around about the time of the Renaissance. By then we had twice as much information. To double again, human information took a couple of hundred years. The period speeds up. Between 1960 and 1970, human information doubled. As I understand it, at the last count, human information was doubling around every 18 months. Further to this, there is a point sometime around 2015 where human information is doubling every thousandth of a second. This means that in each thousandth of a second we will have accumulated more information than we have in the entire previous history of the world. At this point, I believe that all bets are off. I cannot imagine the kind of culture that might exist after such a flashpoint of knowledge. I believe that our culture would probably move into a completely different state, would move past the boiling point from a fluid culture to a culture of steam. Originally, there was only one science of existence. Our entire worldview was magical. Everything we did, everything that happened in the world, had a kind of shamanic, magical significance. If you look at the very earliest cultures, some of whom are still extant upon the planet, the Aboriginal cultures, most of their languages only have one tense. Everything is subsumed within the present. They can talk about things that happened and things that haven't happened yet but will happen in the future, but they talk about them in the present tense. Now, it seems that not only have we split up our existence, our study of existence, into all of these different areas, but we've also subdivided our notion of time into different zones. Whereas once there was this great eternal present, which I assume to be the kind of constant now that animals exist in, for example. But we, as conscious individuals, have, as a species, adapted this different notion of time, where we almost see time as a bead on a wire, that the now is just this constantly moving tiny little moment that we're all in, that is sliding inexorably along a wire from past to future. If you look at some of the models that people like Stephen Hawking have suggested for time, then you find something which is actually much closer to that primitive apprehension of how time is structured than to our rather simplistic and fatalistic idea of past, present and future. I believe that Hawking talks about space-time as a kind of a gigantic starry football, a rugby ball, if you like. And at one end of it, you have the Big Bang. And at the other end of it, everything comes together again in a big crunch. But that the whole football exists all the time. That there is this gigantic hyper moment in which everything is occurring. That would mean that it was only our conscious minds that were ordering things into past, present and future. The idea of solid flying saucers from Alpha Centauri coming and visiting us now or at any time in the past, this is not a rational idea. And yet, because it involves machinery, warp thrust engines or pseudo-scientific concepts like that, then we in the West will actually pay it serious attention, as we probably did with von Däniken. Whereas spiritual ideas from other cultures, we will regard them as, well, they're complete nonsense, they're not scientific. This is an example of the limitations of Western thought, that we believe that we understand the entire cosmos, but actually we understand the insides of our heads, and even then only very poorly. Was it Niels Bohr, the physicist, who in his Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics said that when we talk about or describe remote events, whether that be in the furthest stars or in the smallest and most remote quanta, that all we can ever truly be doing is talking about ourselves and our own processes. That all we see is our perceptions. We mistake that for reality. And consequently, we tend to be very chauvinistic about our picture of reality, as if that were the only one.